Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining us today because, well, we're going to explore something that fundamentally rewrites the story of who we are. We're looking at humanity's earliest, and I'd argue, absolutely most crucial technological leap. This is the exact moment that set the human race on its definitive path to civilization.
So, let's dive right into this. When you think of a massive technological leap, what actually comes to mind? Is it the wheel? The printing press? Maybe the microchip? Well, I'm going to ask you to look much, much further back. Picture our ancestors facing this grueling daily fight for survival in a totally unforgiving landscape. To truly understand our modern world, we've got to understand the very first tool that changed our trajectory forever.
Act 1. The Primal Spark.
You know, when we talk about early humans and fire, we kind of have this cartoon image of them rubbing sticks together on day one. But the reality? It's way more dramatic. The earliest source of fire was almost certainly lightning. Just think about that for a second. For generations, these blazing infernos ignited by totally unpredictable lightning strikes were literally the only source of fire for early hominids. They didn't invent fire, right? They scavenged it. They had to approach this untamed, terrifying beast that just fell from the sky, somehow capture a piece of it, and figure out how to keep it alive. It was a completely reactive relationship with a raw force of nature.
Act 2. Rewriting the timeline.
Now, this is where it gets wild, because our scientific understanding has shifted massively. For the longest time, the established belief was that Peking Man, living around 500,000 BCE, was the very first user of fire. And hey, 500,000 years ago sounds like a really long time, right? But then, this absolutely incredible new evidence unearthed in Kenya and South Africa completely shattered that assumption. It pushed the timeline back to roughly 1.42 million years ago. Guys, we are talking about a difference of nearly 1 million years.
Let's actually map out how this timeline of discovery unfolded. So we had that established benchmark of Peking Man at 500,000 BCE. But then fast forward to 1981, and researchers uncover this groundbreaking evidence in Kenya. And just a few years later, in 1988, boom, more evidence is found in South Africa. Put together, these modern discoveries pointed directly to hominids controlling fire over 1.4 million years ago. It's just absolutely fascinating how a couple of archaeological digs in the 1980s could completely rewrite millions of years of human history.
Act 3. The Burden of Maintenance.
Fires were kept alive permanently. I really want you to just sit with that for a second, because reigniting a fire was so incredibly difficult, they literally could not let it go out. Ever. It was this highly fragile, anxiety-inducing process. They'd let the fire burn during the day, but then they had to meticulously damp it down every single night just to preserve the embers. Imagine the sheer stress of that. Losing that ember wasn't just, a minor inconvenience. It was a catastrophic loss of warmth, of safety, and of their most crucial survival tool.
And here's exactly why losing that ember was so devastating. If the fire died, it's not like they could just reach into their pocket and flick a modern lighter. The most widespread ignition methods were incredibly grueling. We're talking about repeatedly striking flint against pyrites, just hoping to catch a spark, or using exhausting friction methods where you're literally rubbing wood together until the heat finally creates a tiny, fragile little ember. It was a desperate, physical, exhausting effort. Honestly, no wonder they preferred the constant anxiety of permanent maintenance over the backbreaking labor of starting it from scratch.
Act 4. Terraforming and Survival.
So let's look at how this progressed, because the way they used fire really built up over time. It started as just a basic necessity. Step 1, the first human beings to control it just used it to keep warm and cook their food. But then, Step 2, it becomes this incredible tool for expansion. It allowed them to survive in regions that were previously way, way too cold for human habitation. Then we hit Step 3, where it becomes a defensive mechanism. Think of it as a glowing shield to ward off predators in the pitch black. And finally, Step 4, we see this major shift to offense. They actually began using fire drives as an aggressive tactic to actively force animals or enemies out of hiding. Going from huddling around a tiny flame for warmth to actually wielding it as a weapon, that is a massive escalation in capability.
But, as you can imagine, this immense power came with immense stakes. When they kept it controlled, fire was literally a terraforming tool. It was absolutely crucial for clearing forests to create roadways, opening up grasslands for grazing, and eventually preparing agricultural lands. They were literally reshaping the earth to suit their needs. But if that fire became uncontrolled, well, it didn't just burn some trees, it completely destroyed the very potential of the soil. It was this constant, incredibly dangerous tightrope walk between survival and permanent environmental ruin.
Act 5. Escaping the Stone Age.
The source text actually puts this perfectly. Quote, "Mastering fire also opened up the possibilities of smelting metals, enabling humankind to escape the limitations of the Stone Age," end quote. This right here is the pivotal realization. Fire wasn't just about cooking a meal or staying warm anymore. It was the absolute prerequisite, the required chemical catalyst to manipulate metal. Without mastering fire, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, none of that happens. Mastering fire is the exact thing that directly launched human civilization as we know it today.
Which brings us to our final thought. Mastering fire helped humanity escape the limitations of the Stone Age. But all of that traces back to those earliest hominids cautiously approaching a blazing tree that had been struck by lightning over 1.4 million years ago. Every single modern comfort, literally every piece of technology you use today, stems from that prehistoric anxiety of keeping a single fragile ember alive through the dark night. So, without that first lightning strike and the sheer courage it took to harness it, where exactly would we be today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.